Space has become a fiercely contested battlefield. Space station with cannon, satellite with laser, missiles designed to destroy targets are actually not just the idea of world powers, and was built and launched into our orbit. Although a full-scale war between space nations has not yet begun, but for decades, countries are bracing for the possibility of violent conflict high in the atmosphere. They even designed doomsday weapons. Do you want to see what was created? Today, we will discuss the past of space military weapons, present and possible future. Hopefully this gives us some insight into how a space war between nations might play out, and what measures need to be taken to avoid such wars. As early as the 5th century BC, writers imagined vehicles or structures capable of traveling into space, and weapons capable of causing devastating damage. India's Virtuous Man talks about Vimana, a flying chariot or power supply with extremely UFO-like qualities, can transport its members to heaven, and can destroy entire cities with their weapons. In the 2nd century, Syrian author Lucian of Samosata wrote a short story. It contains elements of space travel and interstellar wars between the inhabitants of the Sun and Moon. But until the last century or so, these imaginations have truly become reality. With the launch of the first liquid-propelled rocket in 1926, suddenly, as a species we can reach unprecedented heights and not just into the sky, and beyond the sky. Of course, this technology was almost immediately used for militaristic purposes. Nazi Germany quickly saw the advantages of rocket technology and started developing their VR rocket. This rocket can skim the edge of space, up to 80 kilometers, then came down from the sky, devastating destruction. Fortunately, this breakthrough came too late in the war. Can't change the outcome of the war. But the V-2 rocket has at least become the B-block of mankind's first space weapon. They themselves may just be flitting through space, but their descendants, the 1959 ICBMs, were able to actually reach space. Fortunately, the war is finally over, because Nazi scientists were considering other, more imaginative weapons that could be used from space. Some of the things they're thinking seem like something you'd see in a 007 movie. As early as 1929, Hermann Oberth began designing a 100-meter-wide concave mirror. This concave mirror could be placed in space, concentrate sunlight to a single point of destruction. The solar cavity idea was picked up by German scientists who dreamed of turning superweapons into a reality. They hope his power will allow them to burn entire cities with his heat. Fortunately, the war ended before his vision became a reality. The birth of rockets had a dual impact on modern space conflicts. The first is the development of more and more rockets with longer ranges. These rockets gain increasingly powerful payloads. This ultimately resulted in the nuclear missiles on standby for today's world superpowers. But the second one is to develop more commercial uses of space. When the first artificial satellite, Sputnik 1, was launched in 1957, humanity is beginning to realize that space can be used as more than just a place to launch weapons. Since then, we have launched more than 8,000 satellites into Earth orbit. They have made great contributions to modern society. Navigation via satellite. Our phones can know our current location and can guide us to any destination by the shortest route. We can communicate instantly with people on the other side of the world. As a result, the economy boomed. Countries are beginning to realize, if we lose them unexpectedly, what a devastating consequence that would be. Space conflict thus opens up a new front, satellite wars. Countries are starting to try to figure out how to protect their satellites. At the same time, 1 billion satellites to other countries are needed. Different countries have taken different approaches to this. Early 1960s, the Soviet Union tried to protect its space interests by launching the secret Almaz space station. It also threatens the space interests of other countries. This manned space station is unlike any other in history we know of, because he has a built-in cannon on his front belly, capable of firing thousands of rounds per minute. He is not perfect. The recoil of such a powerful weapon is a big problem for the entire space station. Targets must be manually aimed by turning the entire space station. But this weapon was actually tested in space. Approximately 20 rounds fired at poison organ targets in 1975. Test results are confidential, so we don't know exactly what the situation is. But a few years later, the Ormus project was abandoned as too expensive and inefficient. But one of a satellite's most powerful weapons isn't its destructive power, but rather its ability to obtain information. Satellites can capture ground-level footage of time in incredible detail and be able to actually listen to smash signals used for espionage purposes. In 1966, the United Nations General Assembly signed the Outer Space Treaty into international law, make it illegal to put weapons of mass destruction into orbit, and encourage the peaceful use of space. But using satellites to spy on enemies seems to be considered fair game. Every superpower uses satellites to conduct surveillance of important locations. Approximately 1/5 of the satellites used for surveillance are owned by the military and used for this purpose. Many satellites, for example, the large Orion satellite owned by the United States, can utilize its giant antenna with a diameter of 100 meters, capture all calls and signals radiated from phone towers into space. Ever since telephone calls stopped being transmitted by wire and started broadcasting wirelessly, it becomes easier for military groups to intercept every communication. Of course, with countries and groups objecting to such intrusions on their privacy. Countermeasures to this have begun to emerge. An interesting aspect of modern times can be seen in the current Russian-Ukrainian conflict. Satellites play a powerful role in modern conflicts. Enables military forces to track enemy combatants and relay information back to ground forces. However, because large areas on the battlefield are affected by GPS jammers, this approach was much less effective in Ukraine. The working principle of the GPS jammer is to use the noise of the GPS satellite itself. Radio signals flood the bandwidth they use, thereby drowning or spoofing important positioning information. Attack drones play an important role in Ukraine conflict. If you convince GPS how many meters away your city is from its actual location, drones will attack the wrong place. So I can't figure out where I should go. This is an actual technology being used in today's warfare environment. It represents the use of space technology as an asset in conventional ground warfare. That is to say, there has never been a situation where one space target attacked another space target. But this is not to say that countries are not prepared for what may happen. Since the 1950s, the United States and Russia have been developing anti-satellite missiles. The United States launched only one anti-satellite. StarTest, he shot down Rico's failed commercial satellite in 1985, using infrared heat to find guidance, then crashed back into him at 24,000 kilometers per hour. The kinetic energy alone is enough to knock the satellite back. Russia destroyed one of its own satellites with its own anti-satellite in 2021. Unfortunately, this particular test ended with the satellite breaking into 1,500 pieces and beginning to orbit the Earth. Debris threatens International Space Show. Russian cosmonauts must shelter in place to avoid life-threatening situation. This is the great difficulty of modern space conflicts. Maybe that's why he's not common. Destroying an enemy satellite might just turn it into a debris ball, and then hit other satellites. Maybe even your own satellite. These satellites then break up and hit other satellites, closing everyone's space amid increasing destruction. This is called Kessler syndrome. Once it happens, it may take centuries to safely travel through space. For this reason, there are growing calls not to impose a similar ban on anti-satellite weapons. No one wants to be shut down by everyone in space. This is the current situation of the space station. Yet there's one futuristic technology that might not actually be that futuristic. The laser that could change everything. Although it sounds like something out of Star Wars. But real-life companies like Lockheed Martin, Job Origins have been developed that have real implications for future conflicts. Not like the lasers in science fiction. Real-life lasers have been focused on targets with incredible precision. Overheats any object that enters his line of sight for an extended period of time. They have many advantages. Photographed at wavelengths outside the visible spectrum, they are both silent and invisible. Only when the target is suddenly melted. That's how you know you've been shot. They are very precise. As long as there is a verified grid, they have unlimited ammunition and can launch missiles from kilometers away on a clear day. Of course, they have an obvious drawback. If the weather is bad, they may not work. Scattering of laser light in the atmosphere significantly reduces its effectiveness because particles lose coherence the farther they travel. If it is foggy or the enemy target is drowned by throwing, the laser will be completely neutralized. If you fail to shoot down an enemy missile because of cloudy weather, that will be seriously threatened. But it may not be a matter of space conflict, because there is no atmosphere in space. A satellite equipped with such a laser and a suitable solar panel array, possibility to easily penetrate other satellites, melted inside, without creating dangerous debris plants. It's hard to see what caused the damage. This means your satellite's secrets will be maintained. Your laser weapon never needs to be reloaded, because he gets energy from the sun, and due to the lack of atmosphere, his range will be greatly increased. The only drawback is that it requires a powerful enough battery pack. Considering its size and volume may be a limiting factor. There are even people who have been creating laser weapon platforms in space that can attack ground targets for a long time. The appeal of this threat is huge. Think about it. A nation instantly kills a target without being visible and without any warning, and there is no room for interception. In 1987, the United States researched sky lasers through the Tianjin Star Project, although the project never passed ground testing. But in the decades since, their military has been trying this. The idea is that the Soviet Union almost launched such a laser and geocentric spacecraft in 1987, but Soviet President Gorbachev banned the launch. His immigration was seen by Western governments as an act of aggression. As it happens, Polar Star space laser launched never reaches orbit. An error caused him to burn up in the atmosphere during launch. So fortunately, the question of whether to give him alms is moot. Despite this, if it were learned that some country or another country secretly sent a satellite with a laser into space, we may have to wait another 30 years or so, or don't know until he is used. Fortunately, space conflicts so far have been largely hypothetical preparations, rather than an actual battle, even during the Cold War. In fact, no country will attack another country's space assets, although many countries are seeking the ability to do so, and many countries are at war with each other. This may be because, if we really start preparing seriously for war in space, we will unleash some of the most destructive forces known to man. Weapons from space may be the most destructive weapons ever created by mankind. No need for sun guns set by the Nazis. All he needs is gravity, and realize that all it takes is a little math. You can redirect a passing space rock, making it a multi-thousand-ton nuclear weapon, because he will release his kinetic energy in a crazy moment. But like the guns on the Almaz space station, such weapons also have recoil. Shooting down enemy satellites sounds like it could be a tactical advantage. Tactically targeting any enemy with a space-launched asteroid might sound good and useful, until you think of the dinosaurs and realize we only had a fragile rock to survive on. The risk posed by an eventual conflict in space may be the strongest reason why it will never happen. If human beings fight against each other for survival, no one wins in the end, and we are all destroyed. This may be a terrible irony. It is also a failure of evolution.